Welcome again. My name is Gail Shields Miller, and I am a board member at BigTent USA. At BigTent, we are steadfast in our commitment to defending our democratic values, the Constitution, and the rule of law. Our goal is to empower you with facts and calls to action so you can become a stronger, more effective advocate for our country. This morning, we are so very excited to welcome Representative James Talarico, Dawn Jones, and Aaron Parnas to BigTent. James Talarico is an eighth-generation Texan, former middle school teacher and preacher. Born to a single mom in Round Rock, James earned degrees from the University of Texas at Austin, Harvard University, and Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Before serving in the legislature, he taught English on the Westside of San Antonio. James was elected as state representative at the early age of 29. Now he is running for the U.S. Senate to take his fight against big money and corruption to Washington and win back power for the working people. Dawn Jones, born and raised in Houston, Texas, is a proud two-time graduate of Texas Southern University. She has dedicated the past decade to social justice and advocacy, managing student organizing programs for presidential, Senate, and gubernatorial campaigns. With extensive experience in building grassroots movements, she now serves as the Texas Organizing Director for Courier, Texas, where she bridges the gap between organizing and civic media. Aaron Parnas, our host, is one of the leading voices shaping how news is consumed today. An independent journalist, political commentator, strategist, and attorney, Aaron has quickly become a key figure in the national political conversation, offering sharp insights at the intersection of law, media, and policy. He first gained widespread attention through viral educational content that breaks down complex political issues in a fast, accessible way, particularly resonating with younger, highly engaged audiences. Aaron was also just named to Forbes' prestigious 30 Under 30 list. Congratulations, Aaron. That's wonderful. Aaron, James, and Dawn, thank you so much for coming to BigTent USA. And at this moment, Aaron, I will turn the call over to you.
Thanks so much, Gail. Dawn, super excited to be here with you today on a very exciting day in Texas politics. I just got to ask you, how are you feeling? I mean, a lot of people have written off Texas for a long time. It's a conservative state historically. How are you feeling this year?
Well, this morning, not even this year, there is a recent, there's a development every single day here in Texas. And so I think overall, everyone is feeling incredibly energized right now. And, there's definitely a lot going on here in Texas.
And I got to ask you about Courier, Texas. What are your plans heading into the on-year, heading into 2026 to highlight that Texas is winnable for Democrats?
Yep. So the way that we try to use our model is we really try to stay on the ground and not just be in the community, but really be of the community, which means we are at the community events, we are at rallies, we are on the ground, we are hearing from everyday voters and everyday Texans. And so we are using those community organizing skills and really trying to frame our reporting that way. So from now until March, and then from March until November, we will be really laser focused on just informing folks of what's at stake, the candidates that we have. You'll see a lot more interviews from us with candidates, just so that we can lay up, what we really have going on here in Texas.
So you talk about hearing from subscribers, hearing from your readers. Right now, I guess, what are the biggest concerns that you're hearing from those folks?
Yeah, just like you said, there's a lot going on here in Texas. And I think now we are starting to see that we do have a shot here in Texas. And so I think overall, everyone has, kind of the same concerns, which are things like affordability, healthcare and things like that. However, folks here in Texas are looking for real leadership. We are looking for someone who is able to kind of be fearless in this fight and really create some clarity for everyday people. So when we are talking to everyday voters, they are looking for folks like James Talarico, Jasmine Crockett, Jolanda Jones in Houston, Texas, some folks who are, have a clear path forward. And so that seems to be what everyday voters are looking for here.
Now I got to ask you, Texas, it's a big state, lots of folks, lots of voters. How you're a local news outlet. How are you trying to reach audiences across the state, making sure that folks from the south to the north, east, west, they all hear it?
Yep. So, okay, let me be clear. We know that Texas is like our own little country in one. And so even, with me and my background here organizing here in Texas, we understand that every single region is completely different. What resonates with folks in Houston will not resonate with folks in RGV. And so what we have done at Courier Texas is really try to kind of break it up by regions. And so we have different newsrooms in each region. We have one in DFW, we have one in Houston. We're opening in San Antonio by the end of this year, and we're looking at RGV at the top of next year. And that's because we understand how diverse Texas is. I mean, folks in El Paso are in a different time zone. So that is just
Hmm.
creating context of how different it is here. And that's because we know that, priorities are different. And also things like language accessibility are huge things. And so we know that we need to really invest in local reporters who understand the communities of each of the regions.
Well, I got to ask you because a lot of folks have this. I mean, in 2025, 2026, we're talking about this change from mainstream media, these large media organizations, to more local news, more new media. How have you seen that shift happen in Texas?
Yeah. I mean, definitely we are at a new age. And so, a lot of what we see now are things on our phone, making sure that news is accessible for folks every single day and everyone is constantly on their phone. And so we've seen a large shift from, just the kind of traditional news in which we would see newspapers and things like that. And we've seen a dramatic shift to digital
Hmm.
engagement and digital organizing and digital news. And that's how we try to prioritize our news with social reporting. We do, you know, visual led explainers and things of that nature because we want to make sure that we are kind of meeting folks where they are. And that is just on their phones, on social media.
Well, there are a lot of big, like, hot button issues, right? You have redistricting, you have the Senate race, but there are also tons of local issues and news stories that matter to folks across Texas. So, what are some stories and kind of trends that you're seeing more on the local level that maybe the national media isn't picking up on?
Yeah, I mean, immigration issues are all over. However, they're impacting each of the cities. I mean, there's a fight going on in Houston right now where they are trying to get HPD from cooperating with ICE. So, and these are things that are happening in each individual cities. They packed out City Hall just last week, trying
Hmm.
to demand that they kind of break this collaboration with ICE. And so these are things that, we hear of the immigration issues that are going around nationwide, but they're happening kind of right in our neighborhoods.
And if folks wanted to learn more about Courier Texas or even maybe get involved themselves, how can they do that?
Yeah, okay, so you can definitely go to couriertexas.com. We have a DFW newsletter that is issued every single day, Monday through Friday. We also have a Houston newsletter that comes out 3 times a week. In addition to that, we have a education focused newsletter that is all about Texas education, and that's called the Tex Ed Report. And you can subscribe to all of those newsletters by just going to couriertexas.com. We are also on all the social media platforms, that's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and now YouTube at Courier, Texas.
Now, Don, in a few minutes, we're going to have Representative Talarico join us. And obviously, there's some big news in the Texas Senate race right now, a lot of shifting dynamics in Texas politics. I guess, how does a newspaper like Courier cover that in a time where things are moving so quickly? You have candidates dropping out, candidates switching districts. How does that even work?
We are reporting it in real time, and I think the thing is that we're trying to get ahead of it because, everyday folks deserve to know. And in particular, as it pertains to the Senate race, it's becoming really exciting. It's becoming very competitive. So we are trying to keep our ears to the street, stay in the community, and just continue to report kind of breaking news on the spot.
Do you all see kind of this want from folks across the state for you guys to like really lean in and endorse a candidate early on, or I don't know. I don't know if you guys do endorsements, but if you do, is that what you're kind of hearing from folks right now?
Not necessarily. So we don't do endorsements. We kind of just try to create candidate profiles and let, the audience make their own decisions. But what we do try to do is just pack them with as much information as we can so that they can make the best informed decisions on their own.
And how do you guys work with these larger media organizations that want to come in and say, "We got the scoop," when it's really that you guys are doing it locally on the ground?
I mean, we're all in the same game. So, we partner with plenty of, on the ground folks like Texas Tribune and, Dallas Morning News. So we're all, in the same game and, we welcome partnership.
That makes sense. That makes sense. We do have some questions in the chat right now as we wait for Representative Talarico to join. Uh, Patrice Mahler asks, where can I go to get information about all candidates local to research, decide who to advocate for? I belong to a local group of neighbors who would like to get active right now in political elections.
Oh, okay. So I want to give you sites like Ballotpedia, but I would really encourage you to just get involved with like community organizations, Women League of Voters or League of Women Voters. They do really great work. Progress Texas does interviews with individual candidates all of the time, which creates, greater candidate profile. So I would highly encourage that you get involved with like community organizations on the ground.
Another question we have in the chat from Elaine. She talks about districts being slated to be red or blue. And what is the likelihood of red districts going blue or blue districts going red in a year where districts are really so gerrymandered based on what you see?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we have like districts, we have like counties like Tarrant County who has gone, kind of purplish back to red, and we've been bouncing back and forth. But I think it's still a really competitive time right now, and so I think it can go either way. And I think that just depends on how we're able to mobilize voters. So I think although the districts have been shifted and all things have happened, I think it really comes down to who we're able to mobilize on the ground.
Ken asks essentially that there are so many important issues of concern to voters across the country, whether it's or even across Texas regarding affordability, housing, et cetera. But also, we live in a time where obviously news media and just due process, the First Amendment, it's all kind of under attack by what we're seeing in the White House. So, I guess, how does a media organization kind of operate with that understanding that you could be in a Truth Social post tomorrow, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, we just go through by providing factual news. And I think folks are able to make the decisions on their own. In particular, as it pertains to the redistricting battle, when the lower court ruling came out, we were able to kind of really put out the statement, which was said that the maps were racially motivated. And here we are a couple of weeks later, and then the maps are still moving forward. And so I think in those sorts of situations, by us just straight up putting out the facts, people are able to see, what is happening on a federal level.
And I got to ask you, in the past year, because we're almost at the end of 2025, what's the one news story that, in your opinion, defines 2025 on it from a Texas perspective?
It would have to be the redistricting. I mean, that
Redistricting.
was just an ongoing battle, and it was day after day. It went from kind of the public hearings, and then it went to the quorum break, and up until now, where it's still a battle. So it would have to be the redistricting of it all.
And what about heading into 2026? What do you think the story is if you had to predict to define Texas in 2026?
I think as we head to 2026, the story is that folks are fighting back. I think a lot of Texans saw what happened in the November election, and I think they want a piece of that. So it seems like folks are kind of dying to, get on the ground, mobilize, energize, kind of ready to go here in Texas.
Awesome. And I think Representative Talarico is about to join. But before we finish off right now, before he joins, I mean, is there any kind of closing message you have to folks in the chat, folks who might want to get involved?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I see plenty of questions in the chat of folks who are just wanting to become engaged. And I love that. I think this is the perfect time. And so, like I said, I would highly suggest that you get involved with community organizations on the ground, register folks to vote. You can become a VDR, you can be a poll worker. We need all of the folks in this space. And so, if you are wanting to become engaged, please, you can easily Google any sort of orgs that are near you. And I would start to, move that way.
Awesome. Don, thanks so much. It's been great to chat. I see Representative Talarico has joined. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for
Big,
having me.
big day today in the Texas Senate race, but I want you to have the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to folks who may not know who Representative James Talarico is and why he's running for Senate. So, why are you running?
Well, I'm running so that all 30 million Texans can finally have a senator who represents them and not billionaire mega donors. I'm a current state representative. I've served in the state house for 4 terms. I'm a Presbyterian seminarian. My faith is the reason I'm in public service. And I'm also a former middle school teacher. I always joke that teaching middle school is the best preparation for politics. And so we've been in this campaign for 3 months now, and the response has been overwhelming. We broke fundraising records with our grassroots fundraising. We've recruited 10,000 volunteers from all over the state to organize folks in every community. And so we're building a movement here to change the politics of this state and take power back for working people all over Texas.
Now, as I mentioned when you hopped on, today has been a very busy day for the Texas Senate race. Colin Allred has dropped out. Jasmine Crockett may jump in later today. It could be a crowded field. I guess, what's your response? And also, I guess, why are you the best candidate in this race right now?
Well, I think it's good for Texas Democrats to have a choice between multiple qualified candidates in this U.S. Senate race. And our movement is built on unity, not division. So we welcome Congresswoman Crockett or any other candidates to jump in the race. Competition makes us all stronger for the general election next November. But we're going to keep doing what we're doing, which is organizing this entire state so that we can win the general election next year. And my track record is pretty clear. I'm able to fight back and deliver victories at the ballot box and in the halls of power. I first got elected to the state legislature by flipping a Trump district that Democrats hadn't won in 30 years. No one thought the race was winnable. Everyone told me flipping a Trump district was impossible. I was told I was too young. I was told I didn't have the money or the political connections to win. But my neighbors and I, we ran an aggressive, authentic, unorthodox campaign that brought people together. And on election night, we flipped that district with 51% of the vote. And then once I got into the state legislature, even though I was a Democrat in a Republican-dominated body, I still found ways to win. I was able to stop bad bills from passing. I was also able to work across the aisle to deliver results for working people in our state. I passed the first ever cap on insulin copays in Texas history. I passed a major bill to import cheaper prescription drugs from Canada right here into Texas. I passed the biggest early childhood education bill in recent memory. And just a few months ago, I passed a major bill to bring down housing costs for working Texans all over the state. So we have a track record of winning both at the ballot box, but also in the halls of power.
Now, I got to ask you, to win in 2026, you're going to have to win over a lot of Republicans, right? This isn't just you could win all the Democrats in Texas and win, because ultimately Republicans outnumber Democrats in terms of voting. So how do you plan on winning over Republican voters, not just working with Republican legislators?
Like I said, the district that I first won, the district that I was able to hold on to in the state legislature, was a heavily Republican district. And I was able to win as a Democrat by, one, exciting members of my party, particularly young voters, to show up at the polls. What I've been most surprised about in this campaign is the number of young people showing up at our events, the number of young people donating to our campaign. And so we're going to have to mobilize those young voters, those Democratic voters who don't typically show up in a midterm. That's step number one. And then two, we've got to peel off folks from the other side, independents and some Republicans. I was able to do that in Williamson County, Texas, again, where a Democrat hadn't won in 30 years. And so I think I can do the same thing in this election. And I think we've already seen over the first 3 months of this campaign that we're able to do that. We've got Republicans and independents showing up at our events, reaching out to us saying that they have never voted for a Democrat before, but they are going to be supporting our campaign to end one-party rule in this state and finally elect a state rep who is going to be able to fight for us in the U.S. Senate. And I hope we can do that in the general election.
I think that's great to hear. And something that I really have enjoyed about your campaign is that it's not just an anti-Trump or an anti-Washington campaign, right? It's a campaign for something rather than just against something. So as you've been traveling across the state and hearing from Texans of both political parties, what are the issues that are really dominating the conversation on the ground right now?
Well, cost of living is at the top of that list. And that's what I have a record of tackling in the state legislature, bringing down the cost of childcare, bringing down the cost of housing, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. And in order to do that at the federal level, we're going to have to tackle corruption. because our political system is broken. It is corrupt. There is way too much influence from special interests and big money. We see things like gerrymandering here in Texas, all over the nation, where politicians are able to rig the results of an election so they don't face accountability at the ballot box. We're going to have to take on that kind of corruption if we hope to bring down costs for working people in the next election.
Now, you talk about redistricting. There was the recent Supreme Court essentially order, shadow docket order, that allowed those maps to take effect in 2026. How do you see that impacting not just your race, even though it won't necessarily impact the statewide election, but it will impact more kind of district by district elections? How do you see that impacting your race, but also just generally the election in Texas as a whole heading into 2026?
Well, my fellow Texas Democrats and I broke quorum over the summer to shine a national spotlight on this redistricting power grab. And in the process, we inspired other states and millions of Americans to join that fight. We even inspired a Trump-appointed federal judge to strike down that rigged map in federal court. Now, as we all saw, the Supreme Court stepped in to save President Trump's power grab. That Supreme Court, as many of us know, is also deeply corrupt and must be held accountable. But we're going to have to out-organize the other side in this upcoming election. We've built a bipartisan majority that opposes this kind of gerrymandering. And if we can harness that energy, again, across the political spectrum to fight corruption, to clean up government, and to finally make a political system that can work for all of us, I think we'll be successful in this upcoming race.
Another issue that's really become a flashpoint in Texas politics recently is education. And you've had to deal with a lot on the state level and local level in terms of education policy. Right now, what do you see being the most urgent education issues facing Texans today?
Well, before I was a politician, I was a public school teacher, as I mentioned. I taught sixth grade language arts on the Westside of San Antonio at Rhodes Middle School. I saw firsthand how the decisions made in the halls of power hurt students and families and teachers every day. I entered the classroom in the fall of 2011, which is right after the state legislature cut $5 billion from our public schools. And I saw students slip through the cracks because of those cuts. I had one classroom with 45 kids in it, 45 middle schoolers, and it was right after lunch. So you can imagine the chaos. There weren't even enough desks for all of my students. So I had kids sitting on the air conditioning unit in the wealthiest country in human history, in the 21st century, children sitting on the air conditioning unit. And that got me mad. So part of why I ran for office in the first place was to fight for my students in the halls of power. And it's what I've been able to do as a state legislator. I've been able to pass bills to help students just like mine and students just like them all over the state. And it's what I want to do as U.S. Senator. We need a senator who is focused on how we can build an education system that works for every child, regardless of how much money their parents make, and lifts up teachers so that we can, prepare the next generation to not only be successful economically, but also be able to take ownership of this democracy moving forward. And so I'm going to keep fighting for education, just like I have in the state legislature here in Texas.
I have to ask you, as a teacher, how does it feel hearing and watching the Trump administration actively try to dismantle the Department of Education, take federal funding away from public schools across the country? What does that, how do you, I don't know, how do you reconcile that as a teacher?
Well, it's the same fight that we've been facing here in Texas. Billionaires who are trying to defund our schools and sell them off brick by brick. And I led the fight against Greg Abbott's private school voucher scam, a scam that would have taken dollars out of our underfunded public schools and given that money to unaccountable private schools for the wealthy few. It would have gone to wealthy parents who already have their kids in private school. It's a direct transfer of wealth from the bottom and the middle all the way to the top. And that's what we've seen at the federal level. Elon Musk and other billionaires who are trying to dismantle education, because we all know that public schools give working class kids like me. I was born to a single mom who didn't get to go to college, but because of Texas public schools, I got to go to the University of Texas and Harvard University. And that's what That's what schools provide all of us with, that chance to get ahead, to live the American dream. And that's a threat to the people at the very top. And it's why they want to keep us uninformed. They want to keep us at the bottom so that we're not able to live that dream ourselves. So I'm going to keep leading that fight at the national level. We've already seen a federal voucher scam introduced, and I hope to lead the fight against that, just like I have here in Texas.
I do have to ask you about immigration because obviously that is an issue that impacts Texans more so than many other states, as you all are a border state. How has the conversation gone on the ground among voters? Because I think it's interesting that we see this national conversation of, I mean, the horrifying things ICE and CBP are doing to undocumented immigrants and even U.S. citizens across the country. But at the same time, you do have many Texans, including some Texas Democrats, who want stronger border security, who want more investment. So what's the conversation been like on the ground and on the trail?
And those two things are not mutually exclusive. So I think Texans understand immigration better than most folks across the country because we live with it every day, both the challenges and the benefits. I've used the analogy that our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front, and there should be a lock on the door.
Hmm.
And again, you can do both of those things. You can welcome immigrants who are trying to live their version of the American dream, who want to come here and contribute to our communities and to our economy, who want to make us richer and stronger. And you can also have a system that keeps us all safe, that keeps out people who mean to do us harm. Both of those things are possible. And I think most Texans feel like both parties have failed us on this issue of immigration. The failures of the Biden administration opened the door to the extremism that we're currently seeing from the Trump administration. Masked men in unmarked vehicles, tearing parents from their children, kidnapping people off of our streets, waiting in school pickup lines, lurking in hospital waiting rooms. We should be cracking down on the cartels, not our communities. We should be deporting gang members, not small business owners. We should be hunting down human traffickers, not moms and babies. So if I'm elected as U.S. Senator from Texas, I'm going to fight for that kind of comprehensive immigration reform that is pro-immigrant and pro-security. We can do both of those things, and I think Texans and Americans are desperate for a political party that will pursue both of those goals.
And I think that brings up an interesting point of just the attack of the rule of law in America. We talk about all these issues, right? We talk about education, fighting corruption, fighting billionaires, but how do we do that? Essentially, when rule of law is under attack, when due process doesn't exist for many, when you have an administration that really lacks respect for the Constitution. So how do you fight for these issues in an environment where our basic rights and norms are completely being demolished?
Well, I think we've got to take inspiration from our past. Labor organizers, civil rights marchers, farm workers, all of the folks who have pushed for a better America throughout our history faced long odds. They faced a rigged system and a deck stacked against them. They faced bigger challenges than what we're facing right now. And if they were able to do what they did in moving our country toward a brighter future, then I think we can do the same. It's going to take us out working, out organizing, out hustling the other side. I know that big money is powerful, but it is nothing compared to people power. There are more of us than there are of them. And if we can unite, if we can bring people together across all these divisions, then I think we can transform this country. And that's part of the goal of this campaign. And I'm so honored to be doing that work alongside all of you.
I do want to talk to you about an important part of your work if you are elected to the United States Senate. That's confirming judges, specifically confirming Supreme Court justices potentially. Right now, we live in a time where the United States Supreme Court is highly politicized. A lot of people, really on both sides, have lost trust in the Supreme Court historically, but especially folks on the left have lost trust in this Supreme Court, and rightfully so. How do you view the current makeup of the Supreme Court, and how do you view your role as a potential senator in potentially changing the makeup of the Supreme Court one day?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about the corruption that we're seeing on the highest court in the land. And I would push as U.S. Senator for court reform. I think term limits are an aspirational goal. That would be a heavy lift, but I think it would solve a lot of the problems that we've seen in our court. But I'm also for basic ethics reform and transparency for our court, and I think that's going to be necessary to restore the faith of Americans in our highest court. So, I'm concerned about this, and I think most Americans need to be concerned about the corruption we're seeing from our justices. And it's time for the other branches of government to get in the fight here and be able to tackle that corruption so that we can all believe in the Supreme Court again.
I do want to pivot a little bit and talk about an issue that has really gripped the nation, and that's Christian nationalism, and specifically the separation of church and state and the impact of Christianity or just generally religion on American politics. How do you see, I guess, heading into 2026, where religion is becoming even more ingrained in American politics? How do you see that impacting your race and just overall Texans as a whole?
Well, I mentioned earlier that my faith is why I'm in public service. My granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas. And when I was real little, he taught me that Christianity is a simple religion, not an easy religion, he would always clarify, but a simple religion because Jesus gave us Christians just two commandments to follow: love God and love neighbor. And my granddad always said that's because there is no love of God without love of neighbor.
Mm.
And Jesus could have told us to love our immediate family members or our close friends. That those would have been easier commandments to follow. But he told us to love our neighbors, and that's inherently a public thing. And that's what led me to public service, both as a public school teacher and now as a public official. And as I've been in office, I've had to confront politicians who are twisting my faith, twisting a religion of love to hurt our neighbors. And you can call it Christian nationalism, you can call it the religious right, but this is nothing new throughout history. Powerful people will use religion, will use these beautiful faith traditions, and it's not just Christianity, it's all faith traditions. They will use those traditions to consolidate wealth and power for themselves. And just like throughout history, it is always incumbent upon people in those traditions, in my case, Christians, to speak out against this perversion of our faith and this subversion of our democracy. I have led the fight in the state legislature for the separation of church and state. I was raised to believe that that separation in our First Amendment is a sacred boundary. It doesn't just benefit the state, it also benefits the church, because when religion gets too cozy with political power, it loses its prophetic voice, its prophetic power. And so that's why I fight so hard for that separation of church and state. It's hard being a kid, but it's even harder to be different when you're a kid. So if you're a Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, atheist kid in a Texas public school, you already stand out. You're already different. And now the most powerful politicians in our state are trying to cram their extreme version of Christianity down the throats of those children. And that's not love in my book. We are called to love those kids like we love ourselves. And so I think that these Christian nationalist bills are not just unconstitutional, they're not just un-American, but they're also deeply un-Christian. And I'm going to keep fighting back against this Christian nationalism at every level.
I see in the comments, Desiree actually brings up an important point, and that is the fact that there was recently this push in Texas and really in states across the Deep South to include 10 commandments in public schools across the state. Obviously, to me, as a lawyer, that is a clear violation of the First Amendment, clear violation of the separation of church and state. But it hasn't, even though courts have shot that down, it hasn't really stopped folks in the legislatures, but also on the federal level from pushing for policies like that for Americans across the country. How are you going to fight back against that?
Well, I led the fight against the Ten Commandments bill in the state legislature. I killed it one session. They were able to finally ram it through in the latest session. But the way we stopped it the first time around is we built an interfaith coalition of Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus and atheists and agnostics all coming together to say, we don't want this blatant violation of the separation of church and state. And, I've said before that any religion that has to force people to put up a poster is a dead religion. And I don't belong to a dead religion. I think that the unintended consequence of bills like this is going to be the creation of an entire new generation of atheists, people who think that religion, who think that Christianity is all about power instead of love. So I worry about the harm that this will do, again, not just to our Constitution, not just to our public schools, but the harm it'll do to the faith tradition that means so much to me and that's so central in my life.
And I want to pivot and just kind of go broader about Texas and the future of Texas Democrats because last year, Kamala Harris lost the state by about 12 points. Colin Allred lost the Senate race by just under 7 points. What do you say to folks that Texas who say Texas is simply unwinnable?
Well, they're wrong. If you zoom out and you look at the trend lines in our state, statewide elections are getting more competitive, not less. You mentioned a 7 point loss. I remember growing up here in Texas when Democrats would lose statewide elections by 25, 30 points. Increasingly, we're losing by single digits. Of course, we haven't broken through and won yet, but those margins are getting smaller every election cycle. And so we've got to build on that progress. We've got to keep going, keep pushing forward, because I do think that in 2026, we're going to see an alignment of factors that will finally, after 30 years, lead to a Democratic victory statewide in Texas. It's going to require the right year, the right environment. It's going to require the right Republican. As you've seen on the other side of this, there's a competitive primary between some deeply flawed Republicans, including Ken Paxton. And it's going to take the right Democrat who can excite our base and also appeal to folks on the other side. If we can get all three of those things in 2026, the right year, the right Republican, the right Democrat, I think it's the moment we've all been waiting for to end one party rule in Texas and finally elect a Democrat from our great state.
I got to ask you because the Texas Demo or just the Democratic brand as a whole has been pretty shitty, to say the least. Overall, polls consistently show that while there are Trump's approval rating is low, the Democratic Party's approval rating is even lower in some of these polls. How do you rebuild that brand in a state like Texas?
Well, and there are a lot of Democrats like me who are dissatisfied with the National Democratic Party. So you can still believe in democratic values, in our democratic vision, in our democratic legacy of fighting for working people from the New Deal to the Great Society to today, and also feel that the current National Democratic Party isn't living up to those values, isn't fulfilling that vision, isn't honoring that legacy. And I think it's time for a new generation of Democrats, particularly from red states, to step up and take a leadership role in this party and steer us into a better direction. We've got to learn from our past. Democrats, when we're at our best, it's when we're fighting for working people, when we're bringing working people together across all these divisions, across racial, gender, religious divides, so that we can recognize how much we all have in common. And I hope that our campaign can be a small part of revitalizing not just the Democratic Party in Texas, but the Democratic Party nationally.
If you become the Democratic nominee for Senate, you're going to be running on a slate of candidates in an election cycle where you have elections for governor, Senate, whole host of down ballot races. But in a lot of ways, the Senate race is going to be at the top of the ticket. How are you going to make sure that every other Democratic candidate on the ballot also overperforms and is in a position to win their races?
Well, in a democracy, politics is a team sport. There's no way to do this on your own. And I've already been working with the other candidates who are running. We've got an incredible candidate for governor, my dear friend, Representative Gina Hinojosa, who has been a passionate defender of public education in our state, who has been fighting for working people. So if the folks on this call haven't already, please contact Representative Hinojosa's campaign, figure out how you can help her. We're going to be working closely with her as we go into this cycle, as well as the other amazing Democrats who are running up and down the ticket. This is going to be a team effort, and I look forward to being the leader of that team going into 2026.
Now, I do want to pull some questions from the chat. So if you all have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Elaine asks, how do we get big money out of Texas politics, but specifically out of Democratic politics?
It's a great question. And we're all trapped in this broken political system, including Democrats, including me. I have put forward some policies in the state legislature, like the first ever cap on campaign contributions. It didn't pass, unfortunately, but at least showed us a path forward for how we can limit the influence of big money in our politics. It's also going to require some personal decisions by candidates and elected officials. I'm the only member of the Texas legislature that doesn't take corporate PAC money. And I've already pledged not to take corporate PAC money in the Senate race. We should pressure all Democratic candidates not to take corporate PAC money and to put forward ideas like capping campaign contribution limits, like banning super PACs and secret unlimited billionaire donations. I've already said that if I'm elected, I'm going to push to ban members of Congress from trading stocks and enriching themselves while they're in office. These are the kind of reforms that I think could make a real difference in our political system. And again, finally build a government of, by, and for the people, not a government of, by, and for the billionaires.
I mean, that sounds great. I'm going to bring in Don Jones back to the conversation to ask you both a question. So let's bring Don back up if possible. I guess in the meantime, while we wait for Don, I do want to talk to you about just generally looking ahead to 2026 and beyond. What gives you hope about the future of Texas politics and civic engagement in the state?
I am filled with hope every day I'm on the campaign trail. I was in San Antonio yesterday for a big rally, and we had hundreds of people show up. Many of them said they weren't Democrats and were interested in the vision that I was putting forward in this campaign. I'm seeing so many young people show up at these events. We've seen young people stepping up to donate and sign up to volunteer for this campaign in record numbers. We've got members of our team who have worked for a lot of other campaigns. They say they've never seen anything like the youth engagement that our campaign is generating. So I'm really filled with hope for what we can do in this next election if we continue to build this movement into the next year.
Now, here comes Don.
Hey, Don.
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I got to ask both of you. I mean, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions. What, for both of you guys? First, what is your favorite local business in Texas that people need to know about? I'll start with you, James.
So I'm going to be a little biased here. I grew up in Round Rock, Texas, and Round Rock is known for our world famous Round Rock donuts. They are the best donuts in the world. They're also the biggest donuts in the world, as you would expect coming from Texas. So I'll say Round Rock Donuts, and I encourage anyone who's in Central Texas to give them a try.
Don?
Yeah, so I would say Space Montrose. It is a small mom and pop shop in Houston, Texas, and it's gathered with artists all over Houston. And so all of the inventory is comprised of, Houston folks, whether that be community leaders, activists, or just everyday people. And so it's a really great store. Yeah, there we go in the chat, Space Montrose.
What's one memoir or book that you read recently that everyone needs to read? I'll start with you, Representative.
There are many that I could choose from. I read over the summer a book called Holy Envy by Barbara Brown Taylor, a theologian that I love. It was about her experience teaching a world religions class at a seminary in Georgia with some conservative Christian students and their journey learning about the other great faith traditions around the world. And it was a beautifully written book. I encourage anyone to check it out. But I think it has a lot to tell us about religious diversity in a time like this.
Don?
Yeah, I mean, I think along with several other people, have just finished reading Kamala Harris 107 Days. And I think what goes with that is just, I think it mirrors a lot of what we see now. We're talking about, people becoming electable here in Texas, specifically Black women, and just Black folks being at the forefront of kind of the organizing movements. And so I think that kind of resonates with a lot of folks right now. And so I highly encourage everyone to read that, as the chat is also agreeing. I think it really mirrors the ways that a lot of folks are feeling right now.
And I guess my final question for you, Representative, is who's one Texas politician, current or former, that truly embodies Texas?
Oh, that's hard. I'm gonna have to give a couple answers.
All right.
LBJ, Barbara Jordan, Ann Richards. These are the leaders of our state who should inspire us as we move forward into this 2026 race. They showed us what it meant to fight with everything they have for working people. I take inspiration from them every day, and I hope we can make them proud here in Texas in 2026.
Don?
Yep. I mean, I'm just going to echo James with Barbara Jordan. I mean, right now, CD 18 in Houston, Texas has been without representation since March of last year. And I think every candidate that's coming up behind understands the role that they have to fill. Barbara Jordan was just a trailblazer. She was unafraid. She created a seat at the table. And so when we're thinking of, fair representation, someone who is an actual fighter, that person is Barbara Jordan.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me today for this important conversation. Representative, good luck in your race.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I would just want to say a huge thank you to the three of you for this amazing morning that we've had at Big Tent. We're usually an evening crowd, but we're really grateful. Representative James Talarico, it's such a pleasure to meet you and to have you under the tent. Dawn, huge fan. Aaron, another big fan. So with that, I'm going to end the call a little early. I know all of you are so busy. And once again, thanks for coming to Big Tent, Representative Talarico, Aaron, and Dawn. We're truly grateful. Everyone have a great day. Happy holidays. Bye, everybody.